Welcome to Tomorrow's People, the podcast brought to you by Personio and me, Perry Timms. Let's not forget, everything starts with people. Now, talking of everything starts, round about 2008, 2009, social media was taking off. And I found this guy on Twitter who was prolific, but also interesting. And he's here now. So welcome to Tomorrow's People podcast, Mervyn Dinnen.
Thank you, Perry. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that introduction. I was going to say, what happened to that person you found on social media? I didn't know it was going to be me.
Yeah, he's still there. Now, I just had a little preamble with you, Merv, and you've been recently to HR Tech in Vegas and Unleash in Paris, big shows for the HR community. And I said I was picking up your tweets because A, you were taking good pictures of slides, and B, contextualizing them. Social media is still a big part of what you do.
It is. There are days when I think, I need to be quite active, and I start interacting with things. I comment on things, share them, and start some of my own things. And there are other days where I find, I like to observe. Yeah. So watch things going on. I might like a couple of things that I want to refer back to. I think it's quite interesting because as we might get to, I'm myself starting an HR podcast soon. And one of the things I'm quite keen on at the moment is what I call the era of hashtag outrage. Oh. So that you swish on Twitter particularly, or LinkedIn in the morning, and hashtag quiet quitting, hashtag loud quitting, hashtag great resignation, hashtag this, hashtag employee experience. And it's kind of people, I suppose, center around hashtags, and then kind of everybody wants to disagree and everybody wants to give a different perspective. And I find it interesting, but of course it's you can find yourself immersed in this for ages. Yes. So it's kind of, before you know it, half the day's gone and you're still trying to work out what you want to answer to the first tweet you saw in the morning.
Wow. I think we've all been lost down that kind of digital wormhole. But as well as connecting round about 2008 and 9, I think I still had a job when I first met you. We've been in this world of individual entrepreneurialism and so on for quite some time. And I do this, so I'm going to embarrass you. I call you the governor because I still put you in a position where you're kind of the governor of HR social media. But how did Merv Dinnen get to be the Merv Dinnen we've got in front of us now? A little potted history of your kind of career track would be lovely.
I will be as brief as I can.
Go on then.
I went to school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I've only found out in the last 2 years that I could have had my English O-level remarked.
Oh, wow.
I scraped my English O-level, which I was disappointed in. I've only found out that a lot of other people I was at school with who scraped their English O-level had it remarked and all got grade 1s.
Wow.
So had I had mine remarked and got a grade 1, I probably would have done English as my major A-level and taken a very different route. But as it was, my father was a chartered accountant. I couldn't really think of anything else. I was good at maths.
Yep.
My A-levels were maths, economics, geography. And so I trained to be an accountant. If I say it myself, I was fairly good at exams. I managed to pass all my exams at the first attempt. I became an accountant. I've got to say, I don't think I was a great accountant. The bits I enjoyed most were just talking to clients, talking to people, organising. I became a manager. I suppose I was managing people, just interacting with people. I worked in a firm of about 200.
Yeah.
And just kind of the relationships I had with the people there and the clients was what was really good. I kept getting bored, and eventually I went to see a kind of a career consultant who did some fairly early personality testing on me and said, well, the reason you're bored is you're not an accountant. Your profile is classic sales and marketing.
Okay.
The old Thomas International, I'm classic, DI and SC low.
Okay.
And he said, you need to be in marketing or sales or professional selling or something like that.
Okay.
So I started off in recruitment.
Wow.
And I was recruiting accountants.
Yep.
I then moved into recruiting kind of sales marketing people.
Yeah.
And I ended up kind of recruiting marketing and HR people. And that's what I was doing quite successfully. I say it myself, for an organization. Yeah. When their marketing manager, internal marketing manager, said to me, have you seen this thing, Twitter? And I said, I've heard about it. Isn't that where people look to see what Stephen Fry eats for breakfast?
Yeah.
And he said, no, it's a lot more than that. He said, I think it's going to revolutionize how firms like us do business. You've got the biggest network of anybody here. You know the most people. So I'd like to set up a Twitter account, get comfortable with it, and then start building a network of HR people and marketing people within Twitter. And so I started playing around with it, and it just made no sense to me. I didn't understand. I thought I would tweet something, and then like 100 people would comment. I just didn't know how it worked.
Okay.
And I was going to sit down with him 2 weeks later and say, "Look, it's not for me. I think you need one of the youngsters doing it." Right. And that morning, I got an email, a weekly recruiter email, and there was a part of it that said recruiters who tweet, and there was a list of about 20 or 30 people in recruitment who were active on Twitter. And I read down it. I thought, I know quite a lot of these people. So there was a helpful follow all button. Nice, so I followed them all to see what people were talking about. And 6 weeks later, I'm sitting up, on my laptop at midnight with the wife saying, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
I said, "Well, I'm talking to this HR director in America about so and so." She said, "What? Sorry, are you working? You've been paid to do this?" I said, "No, I'm just enjoying it." Yeah. And it went from there.
Wow.
And in fact, just to draw the line kind of 12, 13 years later, the HR director I was talking to in America was somebody called Trish McFarlane.
No.
And so my new podcast is actually launched on their network, the HR Happy Hour network. Wow. So it's still, in those early days, the contacts we made, including me and you, are still strong today, all those years later.
It does take me back to those days. And hello, Trish, listening to this. That's great to know the story of how you connected with Merv. It's shifted and it's changed as your work has shifted and changed quite significantly. You are a regular on the conference scene, but also what I know you're spending a lot of time on is research and analysis of that research in order to publish white papers, to share insight with people. And I would say that's more needed now than probably in the days that we're talking about now. Getting hold of quality insight and information is absolutely what we need, because those hashtags you talked about, quiet quitting, great resignation, whatever it is, there's a lot of people going, it's a lot of hype. Where's the reality in all this? So I'd love you to tell us a bit more now about the kind of work you're doing as an analyst.
Thank you for introducing that bit. Yes. So I have been over the last few years, been doing research. I do quite a bit in partnership with a guy called Matt Alder, who I have to say runs a very successful recruiting podcast called Recruiting Future. And we publish together and we co-author books together.
Right.
We've had 2 books published, one called Exceptional Talent and the most recent one called Digital Talent, which was quite interesting because we'd started writing it in... about say 1979, sorry, in 2019. We were kind of, halfway through it and COVID struck and suddenly everything was off and everything we were writing about was changing. So that was quite interesting. That was eventually published earlier this year.
Yeah, nice.
So a lot of the research that I do is in partnership with, I suppose, tech vendors. It's not necessarily the largest ones.
Right.
It's those who, I suppose, are looking at areas like learning, talent mobility, well-being, experience, those kind of areas.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that the research that I do is really relevant for companies with 200,000 employees and stuff. It's kind of, I suppose, SME or the small, larger organizations and HR within them to try and get a sense check of what's going on in the market out there. What are people seeing? So a lot of it will be survey with interviews, facilitating round tables, and then drawing together a lot of the findings and trying to put that into perspective of what we're seeing. So there've been a couple this year, one around well-being in particular, one about interviewing, which was very well received, actually. It was about kind of having quality interviews, because one of the problems with hiring we identified, there are many, obviously. One of them is being able to actually do quality interviews quickly enough. And quite often people aren't ready, or the interview slots available don't really suit the time that a candidate wants to be interviewed. And it's kind of it's interesting to dig behind sometimes and hear some of the stories behind it.
Yeah.
Because when we're online talking to people, or we're up
Yeah.
on stage saying this is what we see, some of it's quite overarching, whereas it's always interesting getting, I suppose, the smaller stories that go to make up the fabric of the overall.
Like the intricacies.
Yes.
And I guess we're talking about the sort of sequence of events and the impact of it and so on. And I think there's something really important about impact, isn't there? Because those themes that you were talking about to me there, well-being, people experience and so on, they are big terms. And I know that there are HR professionals out there with programs and agendas, but it's kind of difficult to know what to rely on that helps shape some of those activities. So I can imagine what you get to do is, like you said, look behind the scenes, lift the lid, and understand a little bit more about the context, the positive actions, the things to avoid. And there must be something about there's so many themes out there. Like, where do you go with it? How do you connect the dots and so on? I mean, do you conceptualize some of this and say, I think we should be looking at this because it's a theme and it's being talked about a lot? Or is the sort of partnership, I suppose, you've got starting to hypothesize something that you go out and test? You know, what's the genesis of it?
There is a mixture of two.
Right.
So I suppose one would be something that I'm we are quite keen to research, and it's looking for a sponsor for that.
Right.
The other is, we're constantly talking to different vendors, different suppliers, and talking about what they're doing.
Right.
And then it's almost a kind of, well, this would be very interesting research.
Yeah.
How do you feel about working together on a research report? And I think that we try to be flexible, and I've always tried to be flexible with people. So I've written pieces purely based, I suppose, on desk research, because that's what I've been asked to do.
Yep.
I've done things where maybe there's been a survey, or, as I say, facilitated round tables, tried to draw some things together, done some interviews for case studies.
Yeah.
So I think that if you just do the same structure every time, then it becomes a bit, it's kind of it's comfortable. People understand, I know the flow. It's one of his reports, therefore it's going to read like this. But it's also, you're not really, I think you need more flexibility in it, because sometimes some of the, writing about well-being is very different to writing about engagement. It's very different to writing about internal mobility and learning and development. One of the ones we did during lockdown was about how the employees, what access they felt they had to learning tools during remote working. Yeah. And was it working for them? Wasn't it working for them? And that's obviously quite specific. You can't just, you've really got to speak to people and understand what the nuances of what they're experiencing.
Right. And I guess there's a bit of that English coming through there, because obviously you've got to construct it in a nice, coherent storytelling way, build it and so on vividly. And it's nice to hear that you are varying from your qualitative to quantitative stuff.
Yeah.
So that's a nice mix there. Are there any themes that you are really, really hot on and you really like to get your hands on? Are there things that are out there topically and also with the vendor community and the HR profession that you're like, whenever that comes my way, I'm on it. It's a topic I really want to get underneath the skin of?
Yeah, I would say at the moment, it's well-being.
Yeah, right.
Well-being, engagement, experience, and the link to productivity, I suppose, is what, if I look at the theme behind a lot of what I'm doing at the moment, it's that. I've always been fascinated by recognition and that kind of software. I've seen how it operates through people like my wife, who still works. So she works for an international organization in leisure and travel, and so I see how the kind of things I talk about, I listen to her talking about, I've got this thing to do, or I say, that's recognition, that is, it's kind of, I know what that is. And so it's kind of seeing how it plays out, I suppose, and talking to friends who are working in particularly in larger organizations. So I find that interesting because I know how important it is. And that's, if I go back, you asked me earlier about kind of the early days of my career, and I said how much I enjoyed talking to people and kind of managing people, but not in a way of directing them, just helping support them and helping them. And that was, again, what really interested me. I suppose, the recognition aspect, the kind of, well done, or trying to help people to maybe do a little bit more than they were doing, as opposed to kind of like, why haven't you done that? It's kind of trying to get them to see, oh, I could develop this into that.
Nice.
So I quite like that. I think you and I have both spoken before about I think with organizations, certainly in the run up to COVID, or maybe during COVID, it was a lot of leadership is about management and direction. We manage people, we direct them. And I think moving forward, the kind of world we're in at the moment, it's about support and enablement.
Yeah.
It's supporting people, enabling them to achieve their best work, whatever it is they want to achieve.
Yeah.
And one of the things I come back to again around the well-being is that at the moment it's still seen as I won't say a soft subject, kind of a nice to have. How do you define it? What does it mean? There's so many tools available. But, without giving away, you and I have both recently been involved with some research with a third party that isn't published yet, so I can't say anything about it. And we've seen that the impact, things like mental health, people, they don't feel that they can contact their manager or director and say, listen, I won't be in today. I just want to take a day off because, so they'll make an excuse.
Sure.
And things like that. And I've said before that I can see over the coming years that for people, particularly those, I suppose, newer into the workplace, I don't like labels, Gen Z, millennial, or any of that, but people, I suppose, newer to the workplace, questions on interview like, how will you support me if I need help? I can see becoming fairly standard interview questions where I think back to, I suppose, my days as a recruiter. If somebody asks that in an interview, and so things are going tough, how will you support me? That's a no-no. That's completely any interview. Whereas now I think that is a legitimate question. What support is there for me if, I'm struggling, or if, there's a lot of pressure on me?
I mean, it's encouraging to know that what you're spotting through the research is that shift to that more human and an exchange that's not just based on transaction, but like duty of care on both parts, right? And one of the things that I think has been accused quite regularly and still seems to be within the HR and people profession is the lack of evidence and data behind some of the systems they introduce and things they get involved in. Are you seeing there's more hunger and application for data and information? Because it almost feels like your existence is definitely calling to that, to give people more evidence to back their decisions on.
I think so. I think there is a shift towards that. I think that one of the things I've noticed as in-person events have returned, pretty much over the last 6 to 9 months in particular, is that a lot of the stuff being shared from the stage at the big expos, the big conferences, is quite researched and analysis based.
Okay.
It's not, kind of, I've had to think about it and I can see this happening in the future or that happening in the future. Or I spoke to someone the other day and they said this. It's very, this is what the data tells me, or this is what I've interviewed, 20 people and these are the themes I'm getting. There's a lot more of that out there, that kind of knowledge. And certainly in the analyst space, having seen analyst presentations primarily at HR Tech and at Unleash, and I'm sure we'll both be seeing some CIPD. It is seeing people who are sharing much more of this research-based. I mean, a lot of that comes from the US. Right. A lot of the analysts in the US, that's what they do. Okay. They're constantly doing sponsored research. Right. And I think that's something that's beginning to pick up a lot more in the UK and Europe, where it's more about what the data is showing us as opposed to this is what we think. Right. And I think that it's perspective as well. Yeah. I think that we're more interested, not in opinions, not in totalities, but in people's perspectives. Yeah, this is my reading of it, or this is what I'm seeing, this is what I think might be, and leaving that open a bit, because it's not a one size fits all. No. So when I do research on well-being, it's not me saying, right, this is it, this is the template, do these 5 things in every organization and you'll have a great result. This is just the perspective I get from the research. This is what I'm seeing people doing, and these are the kind of things they're doing, which is creating positive results.
Nice. I guess I'm hearing a strong stimulator for people to, as you've said, take that information, know it's got validity, and then think about the application of it within their context. Because you're right, it isn't a kind of here's 5 things kind of meme. It is much more about guidance in order to shape your test and learn experiments and reveal your own evidence, I guess. I'm encouraged by that because I think we've been a little bit devoid of it. And as you say, there's been a lot of speculative things being shared that form opinions. And I suppose the stimulus thing talks back now to like your 2 books. So the first one was called Exceptional Talent. And I can absolutely see why you and Matt Alder would be in that space because your recruitment career and your footprint, I suppose, in both, I suppose, the wider world of work and how we package employee experience into employer brand and recruitment techniques and engagement and performance. And what's been the response to Exceptional Talent then? It's a few years in and you put out some quite bold and I suppose you'd say shaping prospects for people to think about how talent management and development comes in. Are you seeing that it's a real shift and people are really strongly positioning talent and it kind of connects to some of your book work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the rationale behind the first book, Exceptional Talent, was that the what we defined as the new talent journey.
Yeah.
So that if you look at the journey from, I suppose, first becoming aware of a vacancy or a company to the relationship you have at the end of it, after you've left them effectively. And that goes through, attraction, first getting their attention, attraction, actually hiring, onboarding, development, engagement, and then the relationship you have with them at the end, where, as part of an alumni network where they can refer people to you, they're part of the wider outreach. That was changing. That was something all underpinned by tech.
Yeah.
And that was very different for some companies to understand that, the everything is a seamless journey and it's mirroring. And I try not to use the examples of, you need to hire like Amazon or you need to hire like but it's that kind of, as consumers, that's what we expect. And therefore, as candidates and as employees, we also expect that seamless journey. We expect that personalization as well. You're talking to me.
Definitely.
I don't want to receive an email, dear first name, second name. It's kind of like, hold on, I've already applied. It's kind of, but we get examples of that all the time. And so that's what the first book was. And that was very successful.
Nice.
I was able to present that blueprint for the new talent journey.
Great.
In fact, I co-presented that with you.
We did
a keynote, a co-keynote together.
Yeah, loved it.
And the second book was more about, I suppose, taking that, but then looking at a world of digital transformation. Because we saw that accelerating. And obviously, writing the second half of the book during the pandemic, as we came out the pandemic, that was obviously a time of accelerated digital transformation. So that was looking very much at the digital talent journey. And that is, it's the same concept, but it's quite different. We know more about engagement. We know more about personalization. We know more about experience. We know more about, I always give the example of the relay race. So, no job candidate ever says, oh, I really enjoyed the interview and I'm glad I got an offer. I wonder what my onboarding is going to be like. It's just one journey. Now, in an organization, onboarding is nothing to do with, or is often nothing to do with TA. It's to do with HR, it's to do with L&D, it's to do with hiring manager. And there are plenty of organizations of some size where that doesn't start till their first day. And I call that the digital talent relay race. And the first time the baton usually gets dropped is when we make an offer. And it's, okay, done, accepted, ping. And it's kind of, somebody else takes over. But obviously the baton's dropped. It's kind of like there's nobody there to take over. We've got a lap of nothing happening before somebody picks it up.
Good metaphor.
There was some interesting research I saw, actually, about 3-4 years ago. It wasn't huge research. It was done amongst SMEs.
Okay.
And I think there were only like 30-odd cases. But it was really interesting in that it used Net Promoter Score to ask job candidates how they felt at different stages of the journey, from first knowing about a vacancy, first researching the company, first interview, second interview, final interview, offer, onboarding, and their first 3 months.
Right.
And the 2 times, and it asked them to, the different, what they felt about the information, what they felt about how they were being treated, what they felt. And the thing that I noticed was that the 2 lowest engagement points on NPS were between the first and second interview.
Okay.
And the period noticeably between accepting an offer and starting.
Oh.
That's when they were least engaged.
Ooh.
And the thing I spotted was that those are also the lowest points for information flow.
Right. Wow.
So we've interviewed somebody, there's a good fit, we're definitely taking them through to second, but then they don't hear anything.
Oh.
Because we've probably got other people to see, or somebody else is doing the second interview, or, and then accepted an offer. And when they should be, I can't wait to get started, it's like they hear nothing.
Wow.
Until onboarding starts, which might be on their first day. It might be an email they get 3 days before they start.
Oof.
And whereas you've accepted, great. The hiring manager, the supervisor, the director, whoever they're working with, should then be organising information for them. Here's some videos to watch. Here's some, get them in to maybe meet the team ahead of time, so it's not something they do on the first day. Lots to be done on onboarding. That's effectively onboarding should start once we take somebody's second interview. Because they're good enough that even if we don't hire them now, we could hire them in the future.
Yeah, sure. Feels like a massive overlook and blind spot.
It is. And, a lot of companies, and for people watching this interview or listening to this interview, I should say, they'll probably say, well, we don't do that in my organisation. That's true. That's true. But overall, a number of organisations, particularly smaller, medium-sized organisations, it does go like that. And of course, it's the whole, again, it's the tech expectations. Like
very important.
If you order something from Amazon and they're not giving you updates when it's going to be delivered. I mean, I have an espresso machine at home. And I order my coffee online. And, I get to the point where it kind of, on the delivery day, it shows me where the driver is. And I can see how many streets away. I mean, the fact is that often they're like 6 streets away, and apparently there's 15 drops before they get to me.
Wow.
But it's something like that. It's kind of, this is where you are. And it puts you, I suppose, in charge. You know what's happening. You're not waiting for I wonder when the bell's going to ring or something. Whereas, it's with the hiring, attraction, interviewing, hiring, and that early first 3 to 6 months of employment. Sometimes people are in the dark. They don't know what happens next.
At the exact point that you want to capitalize on their enthusiasm and really make them feel wanted. And I can tell you from work with clients, and talent has become part of something that we're stepping into. I recognize that journey in how they're talking about the things they are doing more of and want to continually strengthen. So whether it's the book and or the whole sense of what a journey looks like into early stage employment, it feels like it's starting to click, which is great news. So I'm pleased that those books have had both a nice outlet for you in terms of things that you are like, what? Why are we still not solving this problem? To, good market shifts. And it feels like you can sort of tune and take things to another level after that, right? Because you've got a more solid foundation.
This podcast is brought to you by Personio. Personio is the all-in-one HR solution for now and the future. We help HR teams recruit, onboard, manage, pay, and develop employees more efficiently. And our easy-to-use solution works across every part of the employee lifecycle. Automate your people processes and gain time back for more impactful work, like creating your people strategy. After all, everything starts with people. To find out what Personio can do for you and your business, head to personio.com. That's Personio.com.
Which leads me to another sort of question, really, which is the kind of things that you would really like to get your hands on and push more actively, whether it's in talent acquisition, onboarding, journeys, or whatever, there must be a few things that you're still like, we still haven't solved that yet. We're still underachieving in certain areas. Are there any things where you'd like to be able to kind of lead a charge towards better?
Candidate experience always and forever. I've been involved in 2 or 3 research projects around this over the last couple of years or so. Delivered sessions on it. I'm delivering another one in a couple of weeks' time about why is candidate experience still so CR*P.
Okay.
And you know, I don't know if that's ever going to be fixed. I don't know if there's the wherewithal. I don't know if people see the value in it. I don't know. The more things change and the more we know, the more things stay the same.
I know what you mean.
It's kind of there are organisations. So there are a lot of organisations out there that really do well on their candidate experience. But ultimately, you know, I think where it often falls down is in 2 areas. It's job applications are personal.
Right. Yeah.
I know that people will review job applications, whether it's, you know, in a smaller organisation, so there's not that many, or whether it's coming through an ATS. And think, well, why are they applying here? I don't understand. But the reasons why somebody applies for a new role are personal. And they could be very personal. They could be problems where they are. They could be the sole breadwinner in their family. They could have caring responsibilities. They could be supporting their family. They could, and for some reason, they want to move somewhere else. They might be in a situation where they can't progress. They will be personal reasons. They apply as an individual, need to be treated as an individual, not a massive candidates over there. So I think that is one of the key problems with it, is that if we are going to individualize it to that, personalize it to that extent, we have to be prepared to give a lot more information. And when somebody does an interview, we need to be able to give them that feedback pretty quickly, and it needs to be constructive feedback. No, not quite right. Didn't feel you were the right fit. No, it's got to be something more specific. And of course, I know of the reasons, both legally and morally, why organisations say we can't give that level of feedback, but I still think we need to do something better. That I think is crucially important. And the other thing is that I think most organisations still feel that I won't say they're in charge, but they control the process. You know, we'll bring you back in when we're ready. We'll make an offer when we're ready. And then it's, why can't we find the people we want? Why do we find good people and they're gone? Well, it's because other people are treating them better. Other people are moving quicker. You know, that kind of thing. And everything is underpinned by tech now. So this isn't individuals. When I started work, I was reliant on my CV being handed on to a managing partner to say, do you want to interview this person? You know, I think we should. It's kind of seamless. But again, it's kind of, I think the fact that it's tech enabled actually draws some of the personal side. So that there was a piece of research I saw about 4 years ago, and I can't remember who shared it. And it was data around asynchronous interviewing.
Okay.
So where basically you set the 4, 5, 6 questions, they answer in their own time. And the tech company could see when those questions were answered.
Okay.
And it wasn't a huge majority, but the majority of people answering them, it was between 6 and 10 on a Sunday night.
Oh, wow.
And that really stuck with me. I hadn't really thought about that. That if it's asynchronous, it's when it suits them. And 6 to 10 on a Sunday night is probably, you know, weekend's done, you've had just dinner, you know, and you're thinking about the week ahead, you know, you've got an interview, you know, you're job hunting, so you're preparing yourself for the week ahead. And you quite possibly feel quite relaxed about answering some interview questions at that point. Whereas we asked them to come in face to face, on their way to work, or they've got to take a day off, or they've got to, you know, it's kind of, we put them under pressure. By the interview. And I appreciate that is, a lot of interviewing is not done face to face in that way now. I do appreciate that it's done by, but again, do we, we let people schedule interviews, but do we give them times when, it might be easier for them?
Yeah.
We let them choose the best time for them out of the times that are best for us, as opposed to, we'll interview them at the best time for them because we want to see their best side.
That's fascinating to hear that, because I hear a lot about hyper personalization with tech coming through. And I think what you've talked about, though, is a real sense of the philosophy of this being in the wrong place and at the convenience of the organization. I love that fact that, the approach that people take is a very personal thing for them. And you can understand why people then get frustrated when they feel like they're going into a machine-like system. And that's a big own goal, isn't it? And a big loss of the human touch that I think you're right, we need at that early point. So I'm really hopeful that people listening to this are starting to think about the use of technology and alternatives. Asynchronous, I love that concept. I think you're right. Meeting people where they will feel at their best rather than putting them in this hothouse that we think is a test. When we know when people go into test conditions, they can be the opposite of who they are because of the conditions. So I love that. I mean, I'm hoping there's kind of vote Merv on those two agendas. Yeah.
I think my years working as a recruiter showed me that we spend possibly far too long looking at reasons why we shouldn't hire somebody.
Nice.
As opposed to spending the time looking at reasons why we should.
Really?
And say, well, actually, okay, that's a reason not to hire, but is that outweighed by that?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, in my experience, most hiring managers, hiring directors will say, no, I want someone who ticks every box, not someone who ticks 5 of the 6 boxes.
Yeah. I still maintain that recruiting decision is the kind of most important thing you'll do, because bringing people in who are good cultural enhancers, who have got technical capability, who've got a future, and it still feels like we're dropping the ball a bit. And I'm not being accusational about TA professionals, because I know they're up against it. The relentless demand on them at the moment is something you must be seeing with, the kind of employment conditions that we hear about and so on. So has it ever been tougher to be in TA than it is now?
Wow. I'm sure it's been tougher.
Right.
But I think, no, it's not easy now.
Yeah.
I think that companies want to hire.
Yep.
I think that, as the tech has improved, as the information has improved, the analytics has improved, everything has improved. And you can see that's where the money is, because everybody's concern is they can't find enough people. They can't find the right people.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Going to HR Tech in Vegas.
Yeah.
So I used to go every year, obviously before the pandemic. And as you walk into the expo hall, it's vast.
Yeah.
But normally, as you walk in, the first things you see are these huge stands, these huge booths for, I don't know, can I name names?
Go for it.
I don't know, Oracle, Workday, ADP, SuccessFactors.
Yeah.
And when I walked in this time,
Uh-huh.
the huge booths were Eightfold, Paradox, Phenom, Visio, Analytics, AI. They're all the big legacy HR tech systems were kind of pushed to the side.
Wow. Interesting.
And that's when I know those organizations have raised a lot of money over the last 2-3 years, and this is their first opportunity to really go and spend that to make a noise. So I accept that. But for me, that's a big shift now.
Indicative of a turn, perhaps, in the way we utilize technology.
But in fact, and the way we utilize the data, we utilize the intelligence, the fact that people are happy. Again, a younger generation, a less experienced generation moving through. They don't mind doing text interviews with a chatbot.
Sure. It does feel like the kind of challenges have been kind of reframed, and some of them have been sort of expanded and smashed together and so on. So I guess there is something, again, that comes back to my starting point with you, really, which is analysts are really crucial when it comes to this. Are you sensing that the HR world is now starting to want to bring more analysts of your nature, and perhaps even in-house, into their game? people who can get data, who can make interpretive decisions, who create narrative and kind of align it to strategy, because it does feel like it's become a specialist area within, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, I think that without doubt, more and more organisations are turning to analysts to map out the market, to advise them on current trends, to there are huge user conferences. In fact, we're recording this when, as I said, there's two side by side in Las Vegas today. And we commented before we spoke about, we've both been following some of the social media from it. So these huge user conferences, there's a team of analysts there who are there, who will then go and advise organisations. And I think that if we're looking at UK specific, it's not easy.
No.
And one of the American companies that I'm an analyst for was talking to me about outreach to, I suppose, more UK.
Okay.
And it was a real struggle.
Right.
Because if somebody says US, name me 10 analysts. I could name them all now. In the UK, I don't know.
Okay.
It's kind of, it's not the same scene. And I don't know if that is because we maybe are not behind the US, but we don't have the same kind of approach where we don't necessarily trust them. Because a true analyst isn't just somebody that is paid by a tech company to go out and advocate for them. It's somebody who does research, can map out the market. This is what you want. This is the kind of tech. What's the problem you're trying to solve? These are the kind of people who can solve that problem. This integrates with that. That integrates with this. I mean, even I don't go to that depth. But what I'm offering is basically research data on what's happening in the market and what you need to be looking at and why things are happening. But I think certainly in the UK we could do with and Western Europe to a certain extent. We could do with a much more thriving analyst community.
Nice.
But again, problems are different everywhere. I was keynoting a conference in Turkey, am I allowed to say that? Last week before. And, they're talking to people there. Their issues are totally different.
Right.
So I was talking about the digital talent experience, how to be a place where people want to work. But ultimately, they're a community where most of their young emerging workforce don't want to be working there. They want to be working somewhere else in the EU. They will take a job, but if somebody offers them €2 an hour more to do the same job elsewhere, they'll just leave. And it's very different. So it's kind of, for the research I do is say, look, there's nothing you can really do to counter that because that is more cultural. That is more to do. That's more to do at almost government level. But, all you can do is give yourself the best shot at attracting them and keeping them by being somewhere that is so great to work and offers such opportunity that they wouldn't want to leave it.
Comes back to all those touch points in the journey that you talked about in exceptional talent. And I really like that because I think what that kind of leaves us with is a strong message about the context, about a strong sense that actually there is evidence out there. You don't need everything, but you need enough, as you said, to give you a better shot at solutions. But I think what's strongly coming out for me is this need to strengthen the analyst type of behavior and outcome and impact within HRTA teams, because the people thing is getting more complex, more divergent, and the demands are clearly there to find good fits and keep people in positive frames of reference. That's a kind of lovely note for me to sort of wrap up on, Merv, because I think you brought it back, and I'm thinking back to where you started, your accountancy and numeracy and your English kind of thing. It's all kind of combined really in a way because you analyse it and you tell the story behind it. So I've loved the stories that you've shared today. They've been really, really useful. And I'm hoping listeners and viewers are kind of thinking, hang on, I need to get more into this analyst game and maybe buy the books, Merv, as well. Anything you want to say before you close us down?
It's there's always a great time. I know it's all about great time to be alive and all that. I don't mean that, but I mean I think that for all the problems we've had, obviously over the last 2 to 3 years, the health pandemic, there's been a lot of worry. for people. They've been cut off from families, communities. They've been worried about the health of others. They've been. It's very personal, and I think that's one of the things. You know, work is personal.
Yeah,
and I think there was probably earlier in my career, organisations you worked for were very much whatever is going on in your personal life stays out there. The minute you walk through our door, that's it. You are here. And I think that's changed. We recognise people. They join us as individuals. They join us because they're individuals. And that's how we need to treat them. And that's how we need to accept it. And it's, you know, there will be a lot of organisations, a lot of businesses that are in sectors where they don't have that luxury.
No.
But, you know, there are a lot who do have that luxury who choose not to exercise.
I know what you mean. So there we go. Everything starts with people. So thank you, Merv Dinnen, for joining us on Tomorrow's People with Personio. Hopefully this is the kind of thing that's going to spark you into action about talent, the journey, the evidence, but ultimately what matters to people is that work is personal. Lovely way to close. Thank you, Merv Dinnen.
It's a pleasure, Perry.